Hey y'all, Kate here. It's a beautiful day to be alive. I have had something burning in my soul to tell you the past couple of days, and it is a story from my life from 2022 to 2023. And it is the story of essentially how I became the most depressed I've ever been in my adult life, and then how I became where I am now and how I got out of it, which is the happiest I've ever been in my life. And it's a really personal time from my life. It was extremely intense, and I just have had this feeling the last couple of days that I want to share it with you. And it's kind of a long story. I hope you'll find it interesting, but it'll probably occur over a couple of parts, 2 or 3 parts. And I hope you'll stay with me. If not, it's all good. Move along to another episode. I got tons of great stuff on here for you. Shorter stories, interviews with inspiring people. But today we going to tell this story of how I got real sad, and then how I got myself unsad. And it wasn't just myself, it was a community effort, but how I went from the most depressed to the happiest I've ever been. And here we go. So in 2022, I was on the cusp of a really big adventure. I had been living and working at this meditation retreat outside of Austin for about a year and a half. I moved there like it's kind of in the beginning of the pandemic. And then I stayed there for a year and a half, and it was amazing. I had just such a wonderful time at this place. I was managing all of the lodging. We had like 25 cabins and houses, and I was teaching yoga and meditation and just running that business, and just being out in the land and being outside was just like such an amazing place to be in the pandemic. But I had started to have these inklings that I was meant to go on the road. And I was a little confused because I wasn't exactly sure where all this was coming from. But the first inkling, or the first sort of download I got about it, was one day I was vacuuming my little house. And this word popped in my mind, a word that I had never heard before. The word was peripatetic. And I was like, okay, got to Google that. So once I finished vacuuming, I Googled the word, and the definition of peripatetic is someone who lives and works from place to place, something like that. So I was like, oh, interesting. Like, I had sort of been thinking it would be cool to go out and do life on the road, but it was just really a distant thought. But I heard this word peripatetic and just sort of filed that away, like, interesting. Okay. So a month or two later, I had a session with my medium, which I try to do once a year. In that session, I never ask any questions. I really just want to like know what spirit has for me. And in that session, she said, "I'm having a vision of you, and it's like you're in that movie Nomadland, if you guys remember that movie with Frances McDormand, and you're traveling and living and from place to place." And it was just like the definition of peripatetic. So I was like, okay, that's a little bit weird. I'm going to note that as well. And then the third thing was I ended up having a fling with this guy who had been doing road life for many years. And he shared a lot with me about what to do, what not to do, etc. And just sort of cemented for me that, along with the fact that my time at the retreat ended for several reasons, my new adventure was two things. Number one, I was going to go on the road. And number two, since my time at that retreat ended, I just felt this fire in me to not work for somebody else, and to just put what would it be like if I put all my energy into building my dream instead of building somebody else's. And so that was my big high at the beginning of 2022, was I decided I'm going to live on the road, and I'm going to go all in on entrepreneurship, and I'm really going to make something of my life as an inspire. I'm going to take it to the next level. And as a side note, this is going from like when I first started the You Might Die Tomorrow project back in 2015, 2016, and started writing and, you know, doing stickers and I didn't even want it. I didn't even want people to call it a business. I was like, this is just something that I do to inspire people. And now fast forward to where I really feel like it's my path, and if I'm going to go all in on it and inspire the most people, it needs to take up my time which means that I can't have this other, working to build somebody else's dream. And so I started looking for my RV and finally found her. I won't forget on it was February 18th, 2022. I felt like I had been looking for so long for my RV, and it was literally like a month and a half. But it's so funny how time is in the moment when we're impatient about something. It feels like it's taking forever when it's like you looked around for your RV for a month and a half. It's not that deep, sis. So I got my 1992 22-foot Class C RV, and it was super 90s inside. And the first thing that I knew I needed to do was to renovate it. I had the other RV that I was living in at the retreat. I had bought that one and totally gutted and renovated it and made it super freaking cute. And I just loved it. And so I knew that, of course, I had to make my new RV cute. And you're probably like, well, why did you get a new RV if you already had one and were living in one that you had already renovated? Well, the one that I had lived in and renovated at the retreat, it was a 27-foot fifth wheel, which number one, 27 foot is a lot of foot for an RV and just a single gal driving it around. And number two, it was a fifth wheel, which is the kind that goes in the back of a pickup truck. And I don't know, I just wanted something smaller. I wanted something more nimble. I had considered a van, of course, but at that time, things were still like RVs and vans were really, it was like a kind of at the peak of the market. So vans were like starting at like 45 or 50. And I just, for whatever reason, I didn't want to take out a loan at the time, which now looking back, I totally should have. That not should have, but that I don't know why I wasn't considering that option. I had amazing credit and it would have been really cool to just not put all my money into the RV, buying it and renovating it. But hindsight is 2020. So I bought the RV for like 16 grand, renovated it, put some money into it, made it look super cute with the help of my dad. And I, at that time, had this fantasy that I was going to be the meditation version of Yoga with Adriene on YouTube. And if you don't know who Yoga with Adriene is, she's like the number one, she's a total YouTube star. And she is the number one, definitely a number one, a top YouTuber, as well as the number one yoga teacher on YouTube and probably online. Honestly, she's amazing and she has a huge following and she's just really cool and genuine. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. It's going to be Meditate with Kate. And I'm going to be the Yoga with Adriene version for meditation on YouTube. So I started, I put my all into it. I like went away and recorded a bunch of these meditations and then was recording the visuals to go with them. And I edited them and I came up with the logo and I made the Meditate with Kate website and I put them all up on YouTube and I put them all up on Insight Timer. And like, it was a lot of work. I put together, I don't know, like 10 or 15. It's kind of like coming out with an album in a way, like a music album. It was just kind of what I was producing. So I put all that energy into it and I was going to be Meditate with Kate star. And so I head off into my RV adventure. My first destination was where I am now in Marfa, my most favorite place. And I, was dejected and disgusted that I did not reach stratospheric success within, 48 to 72 hours. And I say that jokingly, but honestly, I was like, I had put all this energy into it and I had all these fantasies of how it was going to go. And it just didn't go anywhere. Like, especially the meditation videos, like almost nobody watched them. On Insight Timer, actually, it has done much better. So I think the meditations are great. This is a side note. I'm doing an ad. This is an ad sponsored by the person who's actually telling you this story right now. Go on Insight Timer and search my name, Kate Manser, and listen to my meditations on there. And I think you'll really like them. There's some really profound ones. And the whole theme of my meditations was, and still is, like bringing a meditative quality of feeling alive to our everyday life. So I have a meditation walk. I have a meditation for when you're sick. I have a meditation for when you're with your dog and so on. So anyways, it's funny that I had all these delusions of grandeur for the meditations, like hitting worldwide success in, 3 days, because I knew cognitively, I actually had a friend at the retreat who worked with Adriene. So Adriene and I have a friend in common. And I knew, and I think it's sort of common knowledge in her story that she recorded a yoga video a day for like 2 years, if not longer, before she finally started getting traction. And so even though I knew this, even though I knew that you got to put in the work and it takes time and you really have to commit, I just believed in, I thought I was going to like hit it big right away, and I didn't. And so once the initial flare of having, going out on this RV adventure sort of died down, and once I got to Marfa and I realized that my meditation videos weren't really going anywhere, I started to kind of like, get knocked off my joy peg several pegs down, and like reality started to set in. And of course, part of it was that I didn't have my mind right, and part of it was that I didn't do a good job of planning ahead. I was really living in a certain amount of delusion, which can be good but can also be harmful. And I also didn't do a great job of tracking my cash flow when I bought the RV and was doing all the renovations and buying different things to like get my life started in the RV. So when I got to Marfa, I finally like sat down and was like, all right, like, let's see how much is in the account. I thought that I had almost a year's worth of savings to get through the year of this first year of like trying to make my own money. And I had this goal of like how much money I wanted to make as an entrepreneur. And it was pretty low. It was like $3,000 a month. Like that was my first like, tier that I wanted to hit. And I'll just read you what I wrote, because this is after I had set off from Austin. I'm in my first destination on my big RV trip around the country and living in the RV and going all in on entrepreneurship. And this is one of my first experiences on my first stop on that adventure. So I wrote this apparently on April 30th, 2022. And it is called, this is a blog post that it's on my website. Well, actually it's not posted. It's still hidden, but you're going to get the secret peek here. It's called G Take the Wheel, and it was written, according to this, somewhere around April 30th, 2022. And so I'm going to read you the story and then I'll tell you what was to come after. This is entitled G Take the Wheel, and it was written somewhere around April 30th, 2022. Here we go. I'm at Margaret's in Marfa. It's Friday night. Look above the hat-donned diners' heads while they laugh and discuss this art opening and that internet thing, and of course the eccentric remote connectedness of this unexpected town. And you'll see pastel-hued color flashes high against the sunny white walls. Pink, then green, blue and yellow, like a floating deconstructed prism. You trace an invisible line back and you'll find the source. Hidden above the open concept kitchen, a stained glass window with colored rectangles stacked one over the other, pink, then green, blue and yellow. If you don't look up toward the rafters, though, you'll never notice those colors hovering in space, an ethereal treasure for the curious. I notice it because though I am indeed topped by my own dust-colored Stetson, I'm not deep in conversation about the immersive art experience exhibiting at Ballroom. I'm dining alone at the bar with a notebook and pen, looking forward to the bowl of spaghetti bolognese likely being plated right this very moment by one of the strapping young mustachioed cooks in the back. Taking myself out to this chic restaurant tonight isn't just a nice dinner out. It's a valiant act of trust that everything in my life is going to be okay. I'm coming out of a crisis of despondence and fear in which I projected my life being over, financially, professionally, and I suppose literally, in just 3 months' time. It started a couple of days prior with simple division. Divide X available cash by Y monthly expenditure, and out comes how long you have to survive as an entrepreneur throwing herself out to the wolves with near zero inbound cash flow. My calculation was 3 months. I had thought I had 6+ months. That time halved was a terrifying shock. My survival mode looked like this: crying jags, fatalistic thinking, self-isolation, and chicken-scratched lists of potential income-generating pursuits, most of which I had already written on other lists, but, wrote again for good measure. It wasn't just the 3 months until I'm broke revelation that had me panicked and fear-stricken, though. It was the intense pressure that comes when one places their entire self-worth in the success or failure of an entrepreneurial venture. I've side hustled as an inspirer for 6 years, but I've always had a paycheck from somebody else. This is the first time I'm relying fully on my own personal gifts and business savvy to survive financially. Naturally, that comes down to whether I am a worthwhile person or not. I had planned on having most of this year to start generating measurable income. I had envisioned myself all the way at the end of the year with a hit article or a hit meditation or a hit something that catapulted me to the mysterious number of followers and sales that will make me proud to be me. I was in an inky spiral of ugly thoughts about my worth as a human and the lack of a place for me in this world. Under that press of financial solvency, the reality that I don't fully believe in myself was laid bare. The climax came during the weekly free meditation circle at the library. It's mostly locals who come out to experience the peaceful energy of the practitioner and the meditation time and communally step out of the hamster wheel of life for an hour every Tuesday evening. Mercifully, at that time, masks are required because as soon as Nick tinged the xylophone, ting, and the group of 8 fell silent, I was overcome with the full weight of the fears, insecurities, and wondering if I should even live that had been swirling in me the past couple of days. Fat tears began to flow. The cotton mask mopped up the waterfall because, silent sobs are my specialty. The feelings were so big, so terrifying that I could finally see the solution. Surrender. Give up the pain. Give up the worry and give it to someone more powerful than me. So inside of my being in that cement-floored community room, my soul spoke to God over and over. I surrender. I surrender. I give it up. I give it up to you. Take it. I can. Now, once I started that mantra, every tear was like a release. My white cotton mask became completely soaked through with tears and snot. As I repeated those words, I also physically and energetically released up to God as I knew them all the fear, worry, and end of days thinking. When that xylophone tinged again an hour later, ting, I was unburdened. In conversation with some of my fellow meditators afterward, I let out a drunk girl, woo, when describing how great that experience was for me. Drunk girl-esque, I should say. I'm glad to be out of the end of days spiral. This is what I said on April 30th, 2022. Partly because being in that is a level of horrendous I wouldn't wish on anyone, but also because I can now see that the fatalistic pressure I was putting on myself would, in fact, 100% impede my ability to succeed at all. In surrender, my focus is to create and sell heartful and meaningful art with zeal and curiosity. Beyond that, the result's out of my control. I also no longer see pursuing supplemental income channels as symbolic of my lack of talent or value as an inspirer. I spent the next day doing a self-worth journaling exercise. I discovered that my self-worth has been chained up to my achievement, but that I have the key. I began to unravel and untangle that chain from my limbs and my psyche and see a glimmer of truth that I am worthwhile and valuable just for being me. The day after that, well, I opened up my budget spreadsheet again with a clearer head to see where I could trim expenses. I looked at my math from that other fateful day and realized I had mathed wrong. I had 5.3 months to play at this game show of entrepreneurial experimentation. Actually, let's play. Here at Margaret's, where I write this, I finished my creamy, spicy, boozy bolognese over thick spaghetti tendrils not quite yet confident enough to splurge on dessert, I declined the server's suggestion and asked for the check. A lock of her soft brown hair came loose from her ear as she leaned in toward me. An angel in the restaurant has taken care of your check this evening. Again, big emotions. Again, tears in my eyes. This time, overflowing gratitude and a huge smile. My fingers traced the pages of fresh pen marks with this very story. In that case, I will have that key lime pie after all. I haven't read that since I wrote it in April 2022. There's just like so much to unpack there. I mean, it was true. I was in the restaurant writing about this amazing experience that I had had in, fear and terror and instability, and then the crying during the meditation, and how I was just like I was making sense of it, and I realized that if I'm so stressed about money and in scarcity mode, that I'm not going to be able to be the creative that I want to be. And someone paid for my dinner that night. I still don't know who. Their identity did not want to be revealed. Whoever you are, if you ever come across this, thank you. You just touched my heart and soul. I did order the key lime pie after I had said no to dessert. When I found out that somebody else was paying for my dinner, I ordered that $7 key lime pie and I loved it. And it set me so high. And I wish I could say that that is, the end of the story. I don't actually. I'll back that. I don't wish that I could say that that was the end of the story. And then I went on and I found all the success and the glory, and I released my scarcity thoughts, and my depression was, was short and sweet, but did what it needed to do. I don't actually wish that, because there's so much in the rest of the experience that I'm about to tell you that has defined me as a person, that has helped me relate better to my clients and helped me be a better writer and a better empathizer. And so, if you haven't already guessed, I got more depressed later on. That's basically what happened. Is I was feeling so great, and it didn't last. All those lessons that I wrote in that article and that blog post, like, I realized them in that moment, but then I just forgot it. And I think it's prophetic that that day I decided not to post this. And I don't exactly remember. I think I was embarrassed to be posting about the fact that I didn't have a lot of money. And it's prophetic that I didn't post that and that those lessons were not cemented. Because imagine if I had posted that and people had commented and were talking about maybe how it impacted their life or how it resonated with them, or they have scarcity mindset as well. I would have thought more about those lessons instead of just writing it, deciding not to publish it and forgetting that I had even written it. And then also not really like fully taking in those lessons that I had learned in that experience. So let's get into the down and dirty, which is that I continued on my RV adventure, and it was highest of highs and lowest of lows. The highest of highs because I was seeing some of the most beautiful locales I'd seen in my life. And I also had total freedom, and I met some interesting, magical people, and I had so many unique experiences. And lowest of lows because I let negative thinking, scarcity thinking, and depression just suck my soul away. Totally suck my soul away. And I was hurting a lot. And, it starts small, and it just if we let these thoughts go unchecked, they just get worse and worse. And so, what started out as you know, nothing works out for me, nobody cares about me, snowballed into far more ugly, ugly thoughts. And, the meditation thing didn't pop immediately. I started making YouTube videos. They also didn't pop immediately. and I had really unrealistic expectations. It's like I lost my resilience and grit. It was just, I thought that if I believed in it enough, that things would happen. And that was where I can see I went wrong, because at the time that it just so happened that at that time I really started studying manifestation, and I started listening to Abraham Hicks, and it really resonated with me at that time because I had all these big dreams and I was on this big adventure. But I got it really wrong. I got manifestation wrong, because manifestation really has two important parts. The first part is, yes, express your desires, say what you want, make your vision board, visualize what you want, act like you already have it. And I did that. I was doing that pretty well. I did the vision board. I was, writing and journaling what I wanted and where I wanted to be. And I was thinking about it a lot. But in that, I was also left to observe the chasm between what I wanted and what I presently had. And what that did was that caused me to focus on what I didn't have. And I missed the second half of manifestation, which is, yeah, say your desires, say what you want, visualize it, act like you already have it. But you also have to be radically gratitude. You have to be radically gratitude, but you also have to be radically grateful for everything in you. But you also have to be radically grateful for everything you have in your life that you appreciate now. And I didn't do that. I was just focusing on what I wanted and what I wanted. And then I started focusing on how I didn't have what I wanted, and it was so far for me to get there. And that's what bred the scarcity thinking for me. And it started as scarcity thinking, but let me tell you, it went real fast into some real dark, ugly shit. So that was April, May, June, July. I had a couple breakdowns in the RV, like emotional breakdowns, but also like auto breakdowns. I was lonely. RV life is amazing, but also can be really hard and isolating. And it was like we started to go down. We started to go down. I also published this workbook that like nobody, like 10 people bought or something. I still think it's a great workbook. I think it can change your life. It's available on Amazon. It's called the Alive Workbook, but I thought that it was just going to be like my first book and I was going to have all these sales. And apparently now I know I don't think people like workbooks. I think people don't want to have the word work in the title. So I maybe I should republish it under a different name. But so that was just another thing that I chalked up to. My meditation dreams didn't work out. This workbook that I published didn't work out. Nobody wants to buy my stuff. Nobody wants to work with me. I'm worthless. No one cares about me. And what it boiled down to, like the final thought that I was really left with in like May, June, and July, in like my just most challenging moments, was God has forgotten about me. There's no path for me in life. There's no reason for me to be here. And part of that came from, I'm going to give a little bit of backstory here. Part of that came from the fact that I felt like I had traveled down the societal blueprint and that didn't work for me. And then I had traveled down this alternative life blueprint and that didn't work out for me. So rewind to Kate as a 20-year-old, 21-year-old ish. And I started this essentially like 7 to 10 year journey. Yeah, really like 7 years. These things happen in sevens. Let me just tell you, a 7 year journey of climbing a mountain that I realized when I got to the top that it was the wrong mountain. So I had fallen in love. I had gotten married. We had gotten a dog. We bought a house. We got another dog. And I had gotten this great job at Google, right? So I'm making the money. I have the husband. I have the house. I have the dog. And I just wasn't feeling it. And I got rid of the husband because we were not meant to be together. And then I thought everything was going to be great because I was single and I had this great job. And it still felt wrong. It still felt like I was on the wrong mountain. And so that was when I had this big awakening at 28. And if you want to know about that, I'll share that story, but you can also read my book. I'll share that story on another episode because it's a doozy. It's a real good one. You're going to like it. But I had, that life hadn't worked out for me. The societal blueprint, or, I was doing what I thought society wanted from me. I was doing what I thought my parents expected of me. And I got to the top of that mountain and I was like, this ain't it. It's not my thing, chicken wing. And so I then started this other path, this what I call like this alternative life path where I was traveling, I was going after my dreams. I had quit Google and traveled around the world. I had written a book. I was telling my story. I was writing. And so now here we are in 2022 where I'm like, all right, I'm going to go all in on this dream now. I've been building this dream from 2016 to 2022. That's a 7 years again. Now we're going to go all in and it's really finally going to pop. No more pussyfooting around. And here we are a few months into that, just a few months. Keep that in mind, like reality check here, Kate. And it wasn't going, nothing had popped and nothing seemed to be working out. And so the story that I made in my mind was regular life doesn't work for me. Societal life doesn't work for me. I don't want the husband and the house and the corporate job. And now the inspirer life, like the living my dharma life isn't working for me either. So what am I supposed to do, God? Like, do you want me to be a landscaper? I'll be a landscaper. I was so bereft that I was honestly, I considered a bunch of other careers. And I had my self-worth was at an all-time low. And it was obviously, as you can tell, really hard. So you get the picture. And then we're closer to August at this point, and I had seen a post on Facebook in the Burning Man group there was this really cool art piece that was looking for build crew. So I applied, I had an interview, and I got accepted. Now, as I was in the lead up to me going to Burning Man, which is a place that I love, and getting excited about being on this build crew, my mood started to lift. I started just getting a little bit out of my black hole, and I started looking forward to Burning Man and getting excited and getting a little bit more perspective on my woe is me attitude. And not even just to minimize it like that, but I truly was starting to come out of like the suicidality or suicidal ideation, and it felt really beautiful. And you may or may not know that at Burning Man, one of the core parts of the culture there is gifting. Now, you can give a lot of different things, and it definitely does not have to be a tangible item. I'm actually really passionate about the kindness gifts and the artistry gifts and all of the other gifts. But this year I had decided, because I was so grateful to be alive, that I was getting the chance to go to Burning Man. Actually, I think that's what it is. I'm actually realizing that right now, is that the reason I was so excited to go to Burning Man was, yes, the art piece, and yes, I love Burning Man, but also because I was like so close. I felt like I was so close to not being alive that I was really excited to get the chance to go to Burning Man. And I decided that my gift that year would be this little note and a rock. So I had a box of rocks in my RV, as we all should, a box of crystals, and I wasn't sure what I had wanted to do with them. But then this idea came to me, and it was I'm getting my phone because I'm going to read something to you. It was to write this really heartfelt note, because I wanted other people who were feeling like they wanted to end their lives to feel seen, because I had felt so alone. But I had started to realize that it's almost like a rite of passage. I feel like this existential crisis and wondering why we're here and feeling like it's all like we're forgotten. I wanted other people to know that they're not alone and to give them hope. And so I decided I was going to write this note, and I was going to put it in this little fabric satchel with a crystal. And I made about, I don't know, 30 or 40 of these. And I would just hand them out to people who I felt like intuitively needed it. So I would just hand it to someone. And this is what the note said. And I remember exactly where I was when I wrote this. I was in the parking lot of the Staples in Reno, Nevada, because I needed to write it and then go make a bunch of copies so that I could put them in the satchel with the crystal. And this is what it said. Dear you, I'm known as a positive person who loves life. This summer, depression enveloped my existence. I considered ending my life. As of just a few weeks ago, though, I can see the beauty of life again. I'm so fucking grateful to be alive and to have this experience with you. Keep this crystal tight in your hand. If ever the dark, terrifying thoughts float through your mind of how it would be better if you weren't here anymore. Let it remind you to hold on for when the darkness clears. Look for the light. It's always there, even when we don't see it. We need you. Love, Kate/Neon, because that's my Burning Man name, Neon. So I had about 30 or 40 of these, and I would just throw out, I was there for like 3 weeks, and I would just hand them out to someone that I felt or sensed that they needed it. When the event started, I came across this art piece that just spoke to my soul and just cleared so much for me. And what it was a enormous lizardy, dragony looking beast made out of old tire fragments that had been sculpted to look like these black scales, one on top of the other, on top of the other, these thick tire pieces. And it had red glowing eyes. And it was like, 10 or 15 feet high, 20 or 30 feet long, this huge art piece, and these red glowing eyes and this big mouth that was open. And when the mouth was open, when you walked up, it would sense your presence, I think, and it would start, this speaker would start, and it would start just spewing these horrible, horrible thoughts like, you're worthless. Nobody likes you. No one cares about you. It was this loud speaker. And then when it was doing it, the beast's eyes would glow red. And when I came across that art piece, oh my gosh, it was as if the thoughts in my mind were just being represented and encapsulated in this art piece. It was like I had a beast or a demon in my mind who was just shouting and slobbering these horrible words at myself all the time, except I was the beast or this, this demon or this beast inside of me. But seeing it from the outside in that art piece and hearing those horrible words that I said to myself, or even worse, it made me just realize how cruel that I had been to myself and how I had pushed out the love. I had pushed out the acceptance and really only left space for negativity, darkness, lack, scarcity, horror, fear. Now, the other part of this art piece was in front of the beast, there was a child, a sculpture of a child. And I didn't realize this, but I later found out that if you hug the child, the beast would stop and it would start saying loving words instead. And that beast had a big open mouth, and I had those treasures, those gifts. And so every couple of days I would go by there and I would put a couple of my notes in the beast's mouth, because obviously if someone's there having a moment with this art piece, they have been through what I have been through. I started to feel buoyant. I started to feel like myself again. I had some clarity, and I made an important move. So after towards the end of Burning Man, I visited the temple there. And if you don't know, Burning Man, there is every year a large ornate wooden temple constructed by the temple crew and other volunteers. And it is the sacred center of Burning Man. Not sacred because it's used with, created with sacred wood, but because people know that it is sacred and people make it sacred. And I would venture a guess that 99% of the people who attend Burning Man every year, which is somewhere between around 80,000 people, visit this temple and process some type of grief or loss. And they'll leave mementos and papers and gifts and, right on the walls all over. And at the end of the week, everyone gathers around on Sunday and it's burned to the ground and we all watch silently. So a couple days before the temple was to be burned, I went there again and I was just thinking about that art piece, The Fear Beast. I was thinking about how I was just feeling so grateful to be alive. I was feeling so grateful to be alive. Again, that's what the sense that I had going leading up to Burning Man. And that's the sense that I felt like this was like a bonus Burning Man for me because I really felt like I would have almost unalived myself. I was really just thinking about it all the time. And so I just was like, I can't believe I almost missed this. This would have been such a travesty to miss this Burning Man. And as I was in the temple that day reflecting on all of that, I just had this voice or this sense and it told me to promise myself to stay alive until the next Burning Man. Kate, you need to stay alive. You need to promise yourself to stay alive until the next Burning Man. And if you know me, or this may not even be public knowledge, even to my closest friends, but I'll tell you, which is that I have trouble keeping promises to myself. I'm rarely break a promise to somebody else, but to myself, have had trouble keeping promises in my life. And so the idea, I don't make that many promises to myself, I think, because I know I have a tendency to break them. So when I got that download, message, inkling to promise myself to stay alive until Burning Man 2023, it felt like something meaningful. And so in the temple, I did. I said, I promise to stay alive until Burning Man next year. I will make it to Burning Man next year. And if you know anything about like alcoholics, for example, it can be a lot to think, oh, I'm going to quit drinking for my whole life. So what a lot of alcoholics will do is to say, I'm not quitting alcohol for life. I'm just not going to drink today. And they do that for like 20 or 30 years because it's easier to think and focus on not drinking today than it is to plan for not drinking for the whole rest of life. That's like a big bite to chew. And so I think that was sort of what I did was I couldn't promise myself that I would never take my life at that time, but it felt doable and it felt meaningful and important to promise myself that I would stay alive until Burning Man next year. So I made that promise to myself and if it like really stuck with me. And I did not know how important that promise would come to be. So that is the end of episode 1 of this series, of this story. And I can't wait to share the next episode with you. Thank you for listening. Thank you. Thank you for listening. We will be back soon. Look forward to catching up with you on the next episode to share what happened after Burning Man that rocked me to my core, to share what happened in the rest of 2022, and then how I was able to miraculously get to where I am today, which is the happiest that I've ever been from the most depressed that I've ever been. Hey, y'all. Happy today. I am back here for part 2 of this 3-part series in which I share the story of the time in my life between 2022, 2023, and now, how I got to the deepest, darkest, most depressed state of my life, the turning point, and how I got to where I am today, which is the happiest that I've ever been. Now, we left part 1 at a pivotal moment. I was at Burning Man, just a quick recap, and I went to the temple and I made an incredibly important promise to myself that I didn't really realize how important it was going to be. When I made the promise to myself, it was important because it felt right and because making promises to myself is something that I am not something is not something that I customarily do. I'm trying to say because I am not the most accountable at keeping them to myself. I'm good at keeping my promises to other people for the most part, but not to myself. But I sat there in the temple and I was on my knees in the dust. And I had this sense that I needed to promise myself that I was going to stay alive until Burning Man the next year. So I was going to stay alive for 1 year because I had been battling these thoughts of ending my life, right? They were coming up with, greater frequency as time went on here and there. It was just something that was in my consciousness in the months prior. But at Burning Man that year, I had an amazing experience on that art piece and I made that promise. I did not realize how important that promise was going to be. After Burning Man, however, I was on a high. I felt great, actually. It was wonderful, and the story that I'll share that was really indicative of where my mindset was before Burning Man and then where it was after was I had been wearing these horrible shoes, not at Burning Man because I have my special Burning Man boots, but in the months prior when I was on the road, I had been wearing these shoes that I literally bought in the kids department on clearance at Walmart. They were actually the Journeys brand, which is like a preteen girls shoe brand. They were these athletic shoes. They had pink laces and this totally fake, ugly suede. And they had no support. Like the sole was, I swear, 3 centimeters thick. And they were so uncomfortable. The toe was like, they're made for little girls. So the toe part was too tight. And I actually started getting, sorry guys, but I started getting like a bunion on the inside of my right foot, where your kind of your toe meets your foot. I started getting this part that was like starting to jut out a little bit and was really hurting me all the time. But I was in such scarcity mode that I just grinned and bared it. This is all I can afford. Were these, I probably got these shoes for actually like $5 or $6. All I can afford are these $5 shoes from Walmart on clearance from the girls department. And they're so uncomfortable and they're literally giving me skeletal issues. But I just, this is it. This is what my bed that I'm going to lie in. But after Burning Man, I was feeling so good. My mind had opened up. I was feeling hopeful. I was able to see things with a new perspective. And on my way after Burning Man, as I was looping over, and I was going to go through Sacramento to visit a friend of mine and to San Francisco to spend some time visiting, I stopped at a very shitty strip mall in a very, one of those budget strip malls where it's like the low cost grocery store and the fake shoe company. So it wasn't actually athletic shoe store. They had the brands, the Vans, the Nikes, the Adidas, what have you. But it wasn't a Foot Locker. I'm trying to communicate. It was sort of like a knockoff Foot Locker vibe. And I went in there and I had in my mind that I wanted Vans. I thought Vans were cool. And I tried on the Vans and they felt the same level of comfort as my $5 Journeys preteen Walmart shoes. And the Vans were on sale. So I was like excited, but then disappointed when I tried them on and they were not comfortable. So I just kept perusing around the store. I came upon the Nikes and I was like, oh, cool. Nike Air Force Ones. Those are also really cool looking. So I tried on one of the Air Force Ones and it was like my foot was stepping in a cloud and I began to levitate a few centimeters off the ground because it was just so comfortable. And I looked at the price of these Nike Air Force Ones. The Vans were like $70 or $80. The Nike Air Force Ones were $120. But my mind was in such a good place at that moment. It was just like, this is what you're going to do. Your foot is hurting you. You can't be wearing these shitty shoes anymore. It's time for you to take care of your body and quit being in such scarcity mode and invest in these shoes so that you can enjoy your life. So I just remember that day. I was so excited. I still had some feelings of anxiety when I was buying the shoes and like bringing them up to the counter and handing my credit card. It was like this exhilaration. But I was also really excited about the idea of just investing in myself. It felt really good after living in such scarcity mode and stressing over every dollar and wearing shitty shoes and God knows, like not getting campsites in the RV and staying in sketchy places. I mean, my scarcity showed up in so many ways. So I had these fabulous new Nikes and I just felt like I was walking on clouds and I felt like I was so cool. It's amazing what like a new article of clothing or a new pair of shoes can do for our ego, superficial or not. It felt actually really good. So I had a great time with my friend in Sacramento. I had a fabulous time in San Francisco visiting my friends and I was feeling really good. Now, fast forward a little bit, I'm still making my way down the coast of California. I spent some time in Monterey with a friend. And then I went down to Santa Barbara, which is where I went to college and lived for a few years after college. And now we're coming into like the late September, October, early October timeframe. And this is where I don't really know how to say it other than the artist of the Fear Beast art piece that I told you about on episode 1 that was just so profound for me, that gave me the sense where I could see from the outside what my negative self-talk was like and how horrible it was and how I was just letting it go unchecked and not reining it in, and that art piece was what led me to make that promise to myself to stay alive. Well, somewhere in early or mid October, the news was shared widely among the artist and burner community that Tigray Mishal Lively had decided to end their life. Whew. It was such a big deal for me. I'm getting emotional, actually. Sorry. It was an interesting feeling because, I had been thinking about ending my life throughout that year of 2022. And, when I found out that Tigray crossed over into from the earthly plane to the other non-earthly plane, it was this very dichotomous feeling of, on one side, just being so crushed and deflated and feeling so empty and disappointed. And on the other hand, just understanding, just having this empathy for maybe how, I don't know how Tigray felt, but maybe having some modicum of understanding of not wanting to be in this world, feeling like I don't fit in this world, feeling like there's not really a place for me. And especially for me, and I think someone like Tigray, I understand was a very spiritual person. Again, I don't know this person personally. I never met them, but that art piece really stuck with me. And even after Burning Man, I did research on their work, and before I found out that they had ended their lives. But yeah, I had this understanding of, as a spiritual being and as someone who even at that point had written a book about death, when you do enough work with mortality, you begin to understand that death is just as natural as being born. And so when you begin to see death as just as natural as being born, there's a slightly different tinge to the idea of ending one's life. Now, it never felt intuitively right for me up until that point to do it. Obviously, I never attempted. But there is this sense of like, I am energy, I am a spiritual being. This body is just a casing. And so, when it is time that it is just crossing from one plane to the other. So it was this understanding of what Tigray might have been going through, feeling totally lost and like one doesn't belong in this life. And then also that deep, just, oh, pain and disappointment and sorrow. So it was a really complicated moment for me. And it just brought back what I had been feeling prior to Burning Man, which was, of course, a lot of negative thinking, the fear beast, all that began to come back. It also caused me to look at my self-worth a lot, because before Burning Man, another individual had opted to take their life who I looked up to. This was one of the co-founders of Meow Wolf, again, another person from the burner and artist community who I felt like had all the success. Oh my gosh. Like, you founded this amazing immersive art experience it's now expanding across the country in this really big way, and you're supporting other artists, and that's not enough. And so I'm just really grappling with these notions of like, what do we do? Like, if success isn't it, what's it? Whew. But after that happened, I began to spiral down. So I was in Santa Barbara, and then I went to San Diego, and I was spending a lot of time alone, and nothing was working. I was losing my zeal for life. I was then crossing across to head back to Austin for the holidays. I stopped and visited my grandmother in Phoenix. And by the time I got back to Austin in, I think, December, no, it was actually right after Thanksgiving 2022. I couldn't I couldn't do anything. I was a mess. I was a wreck. And here's the thing about suicidal thoughts that I now know, or at least was true for me, which is, and I think it applies for negative thinking as well, which is that suicidal thoughts are insidious because in that year leading up to, Thanksgiving, winter, end of the year, the thought of ending my life had come up here and there, maybe once a month, right? Maybe a little bit more every week, every other week, something like that. But it wasn't something that like I was in a lot of emotional pain and turmoil, but it was just something that was in my awareness. It was I felt very out of place. But what I found out by the end of the year is that these suicidal thoughts are insidious, and that if we let them go unchecked, and I let them go unchecked, they begin to take over your life and your psyche and your mind. And by the time I got back to Austin for the holidays with my family, what had been a thought every month became every week, became every day, to by the time I got back to Austin, I was thinking about ending my life on like an all day, everyday loop. I felt so out of my body. I can't just, it's like there was so much pain. I didn't want to be in so much emotional pain. I just didn't want to be in my body. I was out of place in this life. And this is why that promise in the temple saved my life. Because here we are in November, thinking about my pain and ending my life all the time. I even thought through how I would do it. I had this plan that I was going to take my RV and hook up the exhaust to the window and just be off in a forest somewhere and take some sleeping pills and never wake up. Yeah. Couldn't bring myself to do it though, because I had made that fucking promise to myself. And I can't tell you how many times that promise came up. And something about that promise, sorry, I'm getting emotional again. Something about that promise that I had made to myself not to live for the rest of my life. That promise I didn't say I was going to live forever. It was just, I'm going to live for one more year. And that promise that I had made to myself, I kept it even when I didn't want to. And I remember so clearly Christmas that year. I could barely get out of bed. I was crying all the time. I was just, like I said, a mess and so much pain in this insidious dark loop of thoughts of ending my life. And Christmas, afterwards, we went to go visit my sister and her family up in near Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I remember we were going to take a family picture, and it was like everyone sat on the couch, and it was smile, and I felt like a puppet, felt like a marionette. Like I was like I couldn't smile. I was like my face couldn't smile. That's how heavy and just depressed I was, as I just couldn't smile. And my eyes were so just tired from crying and from the darkness and the heaviness. But that promise kept me alive. What happened next was nothing short of a miracle. Some time back, I had applied to attend a Vipassana meditation retreat. And especially I think around the pandemic and afterwards, they became very hard to get into. Like there were always waiting lists. And so I had been on this waiting list for months I kept putting myself on waiting lists and I would never get it. And so a couple days before New Year's, I got an email that said that for the retreat from the beginning of like a couple days after New Year's for 10 days, I got accepted to attend. Can I go? Click yes or no. If you don't know, Vipassana is a 10-day silent meditation retreat. They have them all over the country, all over the world, rather. And when I got that email, it was like, oh, whoa, this is a big decision because a 10-day silent meditation retreat can be very intense. And they actually say multiple times in the email that they sent me about the wait list and in the documentation and the information on their website that if you have mental disorders, if you are unstable mentally, like don't come. Because with the silence, with the extreme amount of meditation that you do, anywhere from 8 hours to 11, 12 hours of meditation per day, it is possible to have a psychological break. It can be very confronting. A lot of very old things can come up, things that maybe you don't even remember. And so I actually wanted to go. I was excited about the idea of going, but I was terrified because I was so mentally unstable. I didn't trust myself as far as I can throw me. Again, the only thing keeping me alive at this moment pretty much is my dog, the people that I didn't want to let down, and that promise that I had made to myself. So I happened to be chatting with a friend of mine, Ricardo, and I happened to mention that that I had gotten on the waiting list and got accepted for this Vipassana retreat on X and such date. And he happened to say that he was already going. He had already been accepted. And this was actually not his first Vipassana. He had gone one or two other times before. And so I knew I needed to ask him. So I asked him for a one-on-one call. We had a call and I don't think I specifically said that I was like very suicidal at that point, but I was just conveying to him that I did not feel very mentally stable. I had been very depressed. And does he think it's a good idea and safe for me to go? And he, of course, said, nobody can make that decision other than you, but that he thinks that it will be fine and that I should go. So I thought about it. I slept on it. And I had this sense that part of me getting out of this, part of me getting over the hump, part of me digging myself out of the hole was going to be something about saying yes, because I think it's actually an incorrect attribution, but everybody says it's Albert Einstein that said, definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Because I had always just in the past year, it had been scarcity. No, I can't afford that. I can't do that. No, 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 no. I'm going to stay small. No, no, no. And I had this sense that I needed to start saying yes. So I said yes to the retreat. And I immediately just felt, as soon as I said yes, that first yes, I felt this breath of energy. I wasn't fully healed by any, but I just felt this new breeze come through me, right? Like a little bit of a spring breeze began to flow through my skeleton and my cells and my brain and my soul. So I went to that silent 10-day meditation retreat. And I forgot to mention actually that, and this is, I think, relevant for some of you. So I want to make sure I bring it up. In these months leading up to this, where, I had gone down to the darkest depths of my life, I also concurrently had developed this horrible sciatica pain, like to the point where I was on a cane for like a month. Many people, when they have sciatica, they can't sit, but they can stand. Mine was the opposite. Sitting, I had like no pain, but standing, I had this horrible pain such that I couldn't stand up straight. I was always like hunched over, leaning, I guess, to maybe not have that muscle contract or not have that nerve pinched. But it was very interesting that the more depressed I got, the worse my sciatica was, right? It doesn't take a genius to figure that out. Although I didn't figure that out at that time. Like I was not exactly in my zone of genius at that time, but I did not make the connection between my emotional and mental and psychological state and this horrible physical pain that I was in. So I was on a cane and was, that just exacerbated everything, because not only am I so depressed, I also have this I'm going to call it chronic pain because I don't know what it's another word. It wasn't chronic like going on for years, but it was chronic going on for several months. And it just, woo, I have a newfound respect, empathy, and appreciation for y'all that do have chronic pain and injuries and disabilities and how you go through life. Because what I learned is that with chronic pain, with that sciatica just hurting me all the time when I was standing, it set everything on edge for me. I remember once I was in the grocery store and they didn't have the yogurt that I wanted to purchase. And I was also having like a very strong pain flare of the sciatica at that moment. And I just like I broke down. I was crying in the grocery store. I was hobbling out. Nobody would help me. Not that I asked, of course, because I was just silently in pain. But it was just I felt so alone. I felt so in pain. So when you have chronic pain, for those of you who don't, what I experienced is that my patience was lower. I didn't have as much resilience. I didn't have as much grit. My emotions were higher, like they were right there at the surface because I'm constantly managing this pain. So I'm just sharing this to say, number one, if you have chronic pain, whoo, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. And I respect how you do life because it is really, really hard. And if you don't have chronic pain now, maybe you have a better understanding and listen to your friends and family that have chronic pain when they tell you that they have no patience because they have no patience. They're in a lot of pain. But when I went to this meditation retreat, was, looking forward to it. I was also reticent and a little bit scared about this mental state that I was in, but I had just felt this like this breeze, like I said. And I brought my yoga mat to do silent yoga in my room. And I also bought this really shitty TENS machine that my mom had gotten me. It's like $7 on Amazon or something. And if you don't know what a TENS machine is, it's this little device that you stick on you and it's electric, it's battery powered, and it gives you little electrical shocks that is said to disrupt the pain flow from the injury to your brain and may also relax the muscle. So in addition to meditating like 8 hours a day and being in this silent, peaceful, beautiful retreat, I was stretching multiple times a day. I was operating this TENS machine on my sciatica and my lower back multiple times a day. And let me tell you that by the end of that retreat, my sciatica pain was gone. And I started to feel a little bit more like myself again. A quick aside about the Vipassana meditation retreat. If you guys are curious, I can do a whole separate episode on that. But for now, I'll just share that it was really intense. It was really beautiful. And I think a lot of people struggle, or the people that I spoke to that did the retreat with me, they struggled more in the beginning adapting to the intense level of meditation that we were doing. And then they had an easier time at the end because they had gotten used to it and they had developed that mental acuity and so on. Me, I had the opposite experience. I found the meditation, it was pretty easy. Of course, I had a wild mind in the beginning, but I didn't struggle so much with meditating for these 8 hours a day. What happened to me was that by the end of the week, I was just almost losing my mind because as someone who had spent the year prior living in an RV, doing what I want, when I want, with no schedule, being on this rigorous schedule for 10 days and having to do all the same things at the same time in the same order with the same people in the same place made me go a little bit batty. Which is good because it helped to, expand my edges. But as I left that meditation retreat, I started to feel excited about life again a little bit. I was still battling negative thoughts. I was still battling this low, heavy feeling, but the sciatica had gone away and I had a little bit of hope. And here's how that hope translated. Shortly after the meditation retreat, I was working at my computer one day and I don't remember if I was actually journaling or on everything that I had gone through and how I was feeling, or if this just came to me out of the blue. But I had this vision as I was, you know what it was, is I was feeling into how bad I was feeling. I was just feeling like, God, I feel so bad. I suddenly had this like meta awareness of how bad I was feeling and how just like I felt like I was just covered in muck and shit. And so I got this vision at that moment. I remember sitting at my office chair and looking away from the computer and seeing in my mind's eye a blue kiddie pool. And that blue kiddie pool was filled with muck and shit. And there I was swimming around in it. I'm swimming around in the muck and shit in a kiddie pool. And what that represented for me was how I felt so bad. And in that moment, I could see how 99.9%, if not 100% of my misery, I had created myself in my mindset, in my letting my negative thoughts go unchecked, in my way of looking at things, in my victim mentality, my poor me, in my scarcity mindset. I was creating this. And here I am swimming around in this kiddie pool of shit by choice. I'm enjoying feeling bad for some reason. Like this sucks, but I'm doing it by choice. And so in that vision, I saw that all I needed to do was to stand up and walk out of my chosen kiddie pool of shit and take steps to get better. And that was really powerful. I'll never forget that vision. That was a really because it was me. Oh, it was me. Yeah, there was some things on the outside in my environment that didn't go well. There was, I had my career was not going the way that I wanted. I had some failed products and launches. My finances were all not how I wanted them to be. But mostly it was me. And after that, and with that breath of breeze and hope from the meditation retreat, I started to make a plan. The plan started with saying yes. That was what I knew as I had said yes to the Vipassana and I felt better. And I had had this vision and this realization that I was creating my own misery. So I started saying yes more. A colleague of mine we had just a catch up one-on-one, and he told me how he attended the speaker training that he found so valuable, and it was referral only, but if I wanted it, he would be happy to refer me. It was really cool and interesting, because I did the interview and I got accepted and the whole thing was rolled out to me. And it was like, you attend the speaker training 3 days in New Jersey and you have to pay for all your own flights, hotels, everything. And there's $1,000 deposit. That's how these people run this. There's $1,000 deposit. So once you say yes and to hold your spot, you give them $1,000. When you show up, there is a $1,000 check with your name on it that you take and you deposit into your account. Why do they do this? They do this to, what I think, make sure that people show up, right? So they're not speaking to an empty room when people don't show up because it's a free seat. I think they also do this so that they know you have money, that they know you have $1,000 at least on a credit card because I'm sure, they're going to try to sell you something at some point because everybody's got to make money. And the third thing is I think they really believe in the quality of their product. And so they're like, yeah, here, we're going to give you this money back. And we believe in this so much that we believe that enough people are going to sign up that we don't need your $1,000 for this intro thing. And so it worked for me because I was like, okay, $1,000, even though I'm in scarcity mode, I'm going to put it down. And I said yes to the meditation retreat. I said yes to the speaker training. I went out to New Jersey and I did it. And it was amazing. It was amazing. If you're interested in this training, get at me. I'll tell you all about it. These people are fantastic. It totally changed the way I look at speaking and was super inspiring and informative and helpful. Number 3, I decided that I was going to do one psilocybin journey per quarter for the year. And I did the first one in January. I did them self-guided because I'm experienced with psychedelics. So I felt very comfortable doing my own self-guided journey alone with an eye mask and the headphones and the exact right dosage that I knew was good for me. And my first one was amazing. It showed me so much. It was beautiful. I said yes to coaching and therapy where I had been historically saying, no, 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 I can't afford that. I can't afford that. Guess what? There are cheap coaches and cheaper therapy options out there. If I could just get my head out of my ass and start looking and say yes. So that's what I did. I went on BetterHelp. and there was low income payment tier, and I did that, and I got an amazing therapist. Ugh, Amber, yes, you saved me. Thank you. I also hired a coach. I went on Fiverr and I found a coach that I felt like I could afford that was just edgy enough. Her name is Alina. She was in Eastern Europe, which was one of the reasons that it was so affordable for me. She was also amazing and guided me. I said yes to medicine. I started after the psilocybin journey. I started a course of a supplement that I have used multiple times to help get me over the hump with getting my brain chemistry right, so that all this other stuff that I'm doing can really make an impact. I take the supplement once in a while called Solar Brightside Joy Boost. Solar is the brand. I'm not getting paid to say this, although I have gotten paid to say things for them in the past, but only because I believe in it. And it has genuinely helped me get out of depression multiple times. You're not allowed, when I'm getting paid to say it, I'm not allowed to say that it's associated with depression because it's obviously not a pharmaceutical. But I'm not getting paid to say this right now. So I can say whenever I feel like these depressive symptoms or I'm struggling to get out of them on my own, I take a bottle of this stuff and it doesn't cure me, but it takes me out of the darkness enough that I can begin to do the work to heal myself. So I started saying yes to that. I also said yes to my master's program. I had been thinking for years about going back to school and getting my master's. And so I said yes to that and I applied. Later that year, I ended up finding out that I got in. And this is all in like the first quarter of 2023. Now, I think one of the most important things, in addition to saying yes, that I did is I had this flash of memory where I remembered several years ago, I had been living and working at that retreat that I told you about. So part of my job was to just like, manage the team of cleaners and uh, the food people and the handymen and the everybody. And the guests, of course. So it was like a 20-acre property outside of Austin. And I was just constantly stomping around, uh, and getting shit done. And one day I'm doing my normal stomping around, getting things done, going here, there, everywhere. And I tripped and my phone sailed out of my hand. Shoo, and it dropped on the rocks. Now I have to back up a little bit here because this was the culmination. And what I'm about to tell you is the culmination of something that I had started a year prior to that, which was I had started noticing that I had become really quick to anger. I would get frustrated. I was even getting some road rage. Like I would flip people off and get genuinely like worked up and angry in the car when people did stupid shit on the road. I was getting mad at myself. I was getting mad at my family. I would get this hot temper when I would stub my toe or something stupid. And so I don't remember how I came up with this, but at that time I came up with this idea to get myself out of this pattern of temper that I had gotten myself into. I decided that every time I found myself getting angry like that, I would force myself to laugh. So I started this training program, I guess, if you will, this mind training program where anytime I would get frustrated about something, I would force myself to laugh. And at first it was like, I stubbed my toe. Ha 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 ha. Like funny, but not funny. But I kept at it. And every time somebody cut me off in traffic or I dropped something or somebody pissed me off, I would just think about how absurd it was and just laugh. And as I kept up with that practice, that training program, eventually it just started happening naturally. Instead of getting mad, I would laugh at things. And so fast forward to this day that I'm stomping around. We've paused at the moment that I am like midair, tripped, and my phone has sailed out of my hand and shoo, it lands face down on this huge pile of rocks. Like this I think that the owner must have had a pile of rocks delivered that day or something. I don't even know where this pile came from. But my phone sailed through the air and landed face down on this pile of just like jutting rocks. And I burst out laughing, genuine belly laughs at how ridiculous it was that here I am stomping around trying to get shit done. I trip and fall on my face and my phone flies in the air and lands on this freaking pile of rocks. It was hilarious. I walk over and I pick up the phone and I look at it and the screen is shattered. And I thought that was even funnier. And this was like the culmination of this. I think it was almost a year training program to train my mind out of that anger, temper, hot temper response into this joyful, absurd, ridiculous, life is hilarious response. And to me, that moment that my phone fell and I was genuinely thinking was the funniest thing I had ever seen was like the culmination of like, I really did it. I really trained myself out of that. And the funny thing is that after I got back to my house with my phone, I was looking at it and I realized that I had had a screen protector on there. I peeled off the screen protector and the screen was fine. And it was just like such a nice little, I don't know, gift that that I had done the right thing. I felt like it was sort of a sign that I had done the right thing and your screen wasn't actually shattered and you could have been so mad about it all day and then you would have found out that the screen's not even shattered, but instead I had thought it was hilarious. So the reason this story is important, fast forwarding now like a year or two, when I'm getting out of this depression is because I knew that my brain was in a track of suicidal thoughts, negative thinking. It was like I used to honestly think at that time that my brain had been taken over by demons because this like these horrible thoughts were just they felt so out of body, but they were just like getting worse and worse. And so after I'd had the kiddie pool vision and I started taking these steps to say yes and make these shifts in my life to ask for help and get myself out of this, I knew that the most important step to really get me out was to apply what I had learned about that temper response that I had had to this. So what I decided was every time I noticed myself having a negative thought pattern, I decided I was going to stop it or, notice it, right? Like you have to notice it, stop it, and then replace it with a positive thought, something not end of days. And as an aside, actually, most of my negative thoughts, and this might resonate for you, they were like pretty delusional. Like they weren't even I went over them in episode 1, but they were like, nobody loves me, nobody buys my shit, nothing works out for me. I don't even belong here on earth. And those just they aren't true. Even if I felt like that and there was some truth to like, oh, nobody is buying my stuff right now, or I don't feel like anybody loves me right now. Like those are more true statements than nobody loves me, period. So what I would do is if the thought nobody loves me came into my mind, as soon as I noticed it, I would replace it with you do have people who love you, Kate. And at first, I call this practice now barge to jet ski because at first it was like turning a big old barge loaded with 100 containers on the open ocean. And that guy's just gotten a call and he's smoking a cigarette. And it's like, hey, Charlie, you got to come back. You got to come back. So Charlie's puffing on his cigarette and he tries to turn this barge. All right, we got to turn. But turning a barge is like, whoa, you got to make a big old wide turn. And I don't know, I'm not a nautical expert, but I'm just going to make the exaggeration that it takes a mile or however long to turn that big old barge. So what it felt like in my mind. It was like going from that negative thought was to the positive one was like this creaky old ship that like I didn't even fully believe it. Like the positive thought that I was replacing it with, but I was like, okay, we're just going to go with it. We're going to fake it till we make it here. And I kept doing that. And literally, people, sometimes it was like 20 times a day. I would have the negative thought. I would have to notice it and replace it with the positive thought. So we doing reps. We doing reps here all day, every day. But the reason I call this practice barge to jet ski is because soon it became more like turning a jet ski when I was changing the negative thought to the positive one. It was like that barge was, we done got smaller. We got more nimble. The brain did, right? These neuroplastic connections were beginning to be made. The old rut of negative thinking was beginning to be filled in, and we're building this new rut of positive, optimistic, logical thoughts. And that's why soon I found like it was pretty easy. Like, oh, okay, cool. Negative thought came in. Nobody buys my shit. positive thought. People have bought your shit in the past. Your book is still selling. Okay, move on with my day. And I actually believed it and it felt logical and it felt real. I now know that this is called, because in my master's program, I wrote a whole paper about it. It's called self-directed neuroplasticity. And you'll be able to find my whole episode on this soon. I highly recommend it if this practice resonates for you at all. It's now worked for me multiple times. So self-directed neuroplasticity is the real name. I call it barge to jet ski. But the cool thing is that what I found as time went on is that it went from barge to jet ski to cool ocean breeze with the sun shining down on me, because I began to, as I continued to do this work, I began to have this free flow of positive thoughts and energy start to come through me, where I didn't even have to do the reps of changing the negative thought to the positive thought anymore. I was just seeing things in a positive light. I was seeing things in a new perspective. I was seeing opportunities instead of obstacles. And it was beautiful. I just shared a lot. That was a lot about all of the different ways and tools and mindset shifts that I used to turn the tide for me from not being able to get out of bed and crying 24/7 and thinking of ending my life all the time, taking that RV out to the woods, to beginning to have a free flow of positive energy and seeing opportunity and hope. There's no one size fits all. Mm-mm. There's no one size fits all, but you never know. You never know what might work for you. And I can only share what worked for me. Now, this is the end. We're nearing the end of episode 2. And the next episode, I'm going to share the magic, like there's no other word for it, but the absolute magic that began to occur in my life after I had really remained strong in all of these steps that I was taking to get myself back to Kate again. Hi, and welcome back. This is the third and final installment of the story in which I share how I went from the deepest, darkest, most depressed I've ever been in my adult life to where I am today, which is the happiest that I've ever been in my adult life. Where we left off on the last installment was I had had a shift in the tides and a series of breakthroughs that helped me see things differently enough that I could begin to take steps to claw my way out of the deep cellar hole that I was in spiritually, neurologically, and definitely emotionally and psychologically as well. So the first thing was, I'll just recap those really quick. What I started doing in January was, number one, I realized that I needed to start saying yes to things instead of saying no and I can't and oh my goodness, I couldn't possibly, and oh, I can't afford. And I said no to everything. It was always a no. There was no solution to my problem. So I started saying yes to things instead. I said yes to my Vipassana meditation retreat that I decided to go to, despite being really reticent to do it and afraid to do it because of my mental state at that time. I said yes to hiring a coach and a therapist. I said yes to going to this epic speaker training out in New Jersey. I said yes to applying for my master's degree program finally after thinking about it for so many years. And generally, I looked for less for the reasons why I couldn't do something and more about how I could walk over those reasons why something was a bad idea and just say yes and get myself out in the world doing things instead of just nursing and licking my wounds in the hole that I had been in. I also started taking a supplement that has worked for me in the past to help right my brain chemistry to help get me out of depression. It's called Solar Brightside Joy Boost. I also started leaning more on friends. I came clean to family members about the dark, challenging state that I had been in. And I probably two other most important things that I did were, number one, I realized that I had been creating my own misery largely, or most of my misery was a result of the way that I was choosing to look at my life and the situations therein. And then I decided to apply a practice of self directed neuroplasticity, or SDN. What I prefer to call it is barge to jet ski, which is a practice where anytime a negative thought would come into my mind and I noticed it, I would immediately shift it and replace it, delete it rather, and replace it with a positive, more adaptive, more constructive thought. So it was an ongoing process of sometimes 5, 10, 15, 20 times a day. I'm doing the reps of negative thought coming in, notice it, delete it, replace with something more realistic and more positive. So that brings us to where we are at the beginning of the year in 2023. I'm doing the work, trying to find my way out. By no means was it a plane taking off into the stratosphere. No, it was like anything. It was messy, there was ups and downs. I'll never forget this day that I was on a call with my coach. I don't remember when it was. It probably had to be like March or April, and I was just a blubbering mess, just crying to her on the Zoom. Of course, we're in the Zoom era. And so she could see all of the snot all over my face. And I was crying to her. I think about like, I didn't know where I wanted to live. And I didn't like my current living situation. Oh, what am I going to, I don't know where to go. And I don't know I'm going to afford it. Just, and this is like after I had started doing the work, right? Like, because it doesn't happen in this like clean, like fly off into the heavens. No, I was on a low point again. And it was so great because I'm just blubbering. And finally I like paused for reaction. She gave me the space to cry and let it out. And then finally, when I paused for a reaction or took a break to like wipe my nose, she said, Kate, can I, she was from Eastern Europe, had this fabulous accent, just such a gorgeous woman. Can I tell you something? I was like, yes, please. She's like, no, I really need to tell you something. I could tell that it was going to be like a thing. So I'm like preparing myself. Yes. Yeah. I'm ready. Kid, I think you sound a little like a victim. This sounds like a victim. And as soon as she sprinkled that little victim word on my head, I knew she was right. I knew she was right. And I just was like, received it, and we talked about the victimhood. But really, she was right. It was like I was just in my problem. I was in my drama. There's no solutions. I'm stuck. Help me. This is horrible. My life is terrible. And that's what it was. And I was so grateful for her. And this is why we need outside counsel. This is why we need coaches and therapists and friends who just can let us cry on their shoulder, and also just when it's necessary, tell us like it is, because yes, I was being a victim and I needed to hear that at that moment. And so I dried my tears and opted again to say, all right, let's catch myself. And instead of swirling down the toilet even further, let's get out of this kiddie pool of shit and walk out and start looking for some freaking solutions instead of just seeing closed doors everywhere and acting like a helpless child. So that's what was happening. And let me just say that I believe that when we are on a correct path, I'm not saying the correct path, I'm saying a correct path. When we're on a path that is conducive to our spirit, that behooves our soul, we receive signs that we are on that correct path. Now, whether you believe those signs come from God or the angels or the universe, okay, or whether you believe that those signs come from our brain's design to look for patterns and validation and confirmation, and that when we're in maybe a more positive mindset, we're more apt to see some positive signs. I don't care. I believe in both of those, actually. I believe in both of those are true. And I started seeing very, I would say, kind of miraculous, magical, at minimum, magical signs once I started doing this work. So January was when, I really kind of had these realizations and started doing the work. And here we are now in, I believe, early May. And I had gotten the invitation to go to a Burners Without Borders summit at Fly Ranch on the Black Rock Desert, which is really special for me because that's an incredibly special land for me as a burner who, very dedicated burner who went to Burning Man for 7 years straight. Once you pop, you can't stop. Although now I'm on a break. I got the invitation to go to this. Essentially, I'll say it's like an environmental summit at Fly Ranch, which is the home of the Geyser, which is some private land owned by the Burning Man organization. And I have this friend, Natasha, and oh my God, like total, I got to have her on the show. She's amazing. You're going to love her. We tend to go through things sort of similarly or like around the same time. She'll be just ahead of me or I'll be just ahead of her. So we can kind of lead the way for one another. And at this time, she had also been really struggling for a while. And I knew that she needed that summit just as bad or more than I did. So I got her an invitation. It was an invite only thing. Got her an invitation. She said yes, which is huge because when we're in these challenging places, it's really hard to say yes when we're so used to saying no and being in the problem instead of the solution. So we went and it was amazing, incredibly special. We saw all these wonderful environmental speakers and met epic people who are doing really incredible things in the world. And on the way back, we are driving in her car down the highway. And the Black Rock Desert it's out in the middle of nowhere in northern Nevada. Sorry, I said it the wrong way. It's Nevada. Natasha, the Nevadan, will tell you that it's not Nevada, it's Nevada. We're driving and Pyramid Lake is on our right, I believe. Yeah, Pyramid Lake is on our right and we're on native land. It's very spiritual land. I always feel it when I go out there. And Pyramid Lake in particular has a lot of magic and mythology and spirituality associated with it. So we're driving and all of a sudden, as we're chatting excitedly about this beautiful weekend that we had and what's to come in our lives, we're driving on a highway going 65, 70 miles an hour. Something comes and lands directly on the highway. And I look closer. It's a freaking hawk. Flew and out of nowhere lands in the middle of the highway as we're hurtling towards it at 70 miles an hour. And I look at Natasha, she's like, that's a hawk. We're like, that's a hawk. We're hurtling towards it. I'm sure she let her foot off the accelerator. This hawk turns and looks directly at us and just stays there for I don't know how many seconds. And we're hurtling towards it. And then at the last moment, like maybe one or two car lengths, I'd say, when we're 2 car lengths away from it, this hawk staring eye to eye, it flies up, flies on my side next to the lake, flies behind our car, and then flies next to us as we are traveling down the highway, flies directly to our side, flying for, I don't know, time. What is time? 20, 30, 45 seconds. And it flew next to us. And we're just like, I couldn't believe it. And then finally the mountains, there's mountains on our left side. The mountains kind of get in the way and it has to fly out. And that was my first really serious hawk encounter ever. But Natasha's a medicine woman, I believe. And she has had apparently many hawk encounters. She told me at that moment, she said, Hawk is my sign. I know this. I've had hawk encounters. Hawk means pay attention. I need to pay attention to something in my life. That's what she said. And I was just obviously blown away and thinking, oh, maybe I need to pay attention to something in my life too. So we're just like so profoundly affected by this just beautiful encounter with this bird. But hawks they have incredible vision. They have these talons. They see their prey. They go for it. So hawk typically means, among other things in, like spiritual and shamanic traditions, pay attention. Okay. So I still continue to work on my stuff, trying to get my mind right, my spirit right. The next month, I am giving one of my walking meditations at Umlauf Sculpture Garden in Austin. And if you don't know, I give incredible walking meditations that I learned at Thich Nhat Hanh's monastery in France. I came back, and that's when I became a walking meditation guide, of my own accord. And I've now given this walking meditation experience at Umlauf Sculpture Garden over 300 times. Okay. So that means that I have been to Umlauf Sculpture Garden in Austin. Imagine going to the same museum 300 times. And guess what? I love going every single time, and it's different and wonderful every single time. But on this particular day in June, I'm with my clients, and there's one part of my experience, my walk, where I allow them to break away from me and to follow their own bliss, just so they can experience what it's like to be on a meditation walk, not following the leader and just sort of, following their own accord, doing what they feel called to do. And I always tell them, this is your time to just follow your bliss, and we will meet up. You're welcome to begin making your way over there when you see me on that footbridge. So this is what I do. And then on that footbridge, I lead them through a very, very profound awareness experience. On this particular day, my clients are doing their thing. They're walking around. I'm making my way eventually toward the footbridge. And as I make my way toward the footbridge, I see directly at my eye level on the railing of the footbridge, 3 feet, I'd say, in front of me, a hawk staring directly at me. You guys, a hawk staring directly at me. I'm like looking around. This hawk is just staring at me. As soon as I walk up, it didn't fly away. It's just we're eye to eye. So I kind of like take a trepidatious step or two forward. The hawk doesn't move. It's just like staring me down. So I just stand there and take the moment in. It was incredible. And then somebody else came up, I think, behind the hawk, and he or she majestically flew away. So now I'm like, wow, 2 hawk encounters in the span of a month. This is starting to be a thing, right? The next month, July, I am on a camping trip with my family. And you may or may not know that I quit drinking. I got sober from alcohol. I decided I'm never drinking again in 2020. On January 18th, 2020, I had this really spiritual experience where I was just sitting, feeling super fucking hungover. And I finally had this realization. I'll do a whole other episode on this, that I needed to, in order to reach, this is the message that I got downloaded, was I heard a voice say, to get to your next level of spiritual growth, you need to stop drinking forever. Or you need to stop drinking, I think it said. That was my clear message. So the reason that I bring that up is because here we are now in July, and my mom has struggled with alcohol addiction her whole life, or her whole adult life, right? Like, it's no secret. I'm sure I have the gene. I'm sure she has the gene. Like, it gets passed down. And we are on a family camping trip for my sister's birthday in Oklahoma. And I had this sense, I was going to bring my RV on this camping trip, but I kept having this inner sense of like, no, don't bring the RV. Don't bring the RV. And finally, like a few days before the camping trip, I told my sister, I was like, can you just cancel my campsite for my RV? I'm going to ride and stay in mom and dad's RV. They had rented one, and there was a bed for me. I don't know why I wanted to even take my RV in the first place. But as soon as I made that decision, I was like, oh, I'm going to stay in their RV. I'm not taking mine. I just felt like, okay, I felt good. Everything is right. I'm not going to go into all of the details, but essentially my mom had a very serious seizure in the middle of the night, at least partially related to, alcohol consumption, and also just, the state of health that long-term alcohol use puts our bodies in. And the very next day, when she had gotten admitted to the hospital because they said that she was going to die, or that she would die if she didn't get admitted to the hospital, the next day was her last day of drinking. This was July 2020, July 22nd, actually, 2023. Whew. So we got back to Austin after she has this profound, serious, terrifying experience and decides that she's going to get sober, not for us, but for her. And we get back that day and we're unloading the car. And then I go out the front door to get something, and directly on the center of the front lawn, like not on the side, not on the sidewalk, not blowing in from the road, one hawk feather laid on the dead center of the front lawn. So here we are. Hawk number 3. I walk out to that feather, clear hawk feather, the stripes, perfect condition, like gorgeous. I pick up that feather and I bring it inside and I give it to my mom and I say, Mom, this is yours. This hawk feather is for you. And I tell her about my other hawk encounters and I say, this is the gift for you. She takes it. She still has it. She's still sober to this day. She is actually celebrating. Ooh, I'm going to get emotional saying it. She's going to be celebrating her 1 year sober tomorrow. And I celebrated my 4 year sober in January of 2024. So yeah, she's 62 years old, y'all. People can change. People can change. Magic can happen at any moment. That's hawk encounter number 3. So I'm just like, whoa, tapped in, feeling it. And I had been involved that year in this art piece that I got really excited about and I got really into, and I actually got too into it. I really put in too much time relative to other projects that I was doing. But I went to Burning Man that year and it was very special because, as I shared with you in the last episode, Tigray, Mashal, Lively, it was, the first burn since they had taken their lives. And it was very tumultuous for me because that art piece that I had gotten involved with really went off the rails for sure. And so I went to the temple. And the other reason that this was so important for me is because of that promise that I had made myself. Not only it was Tigray, it was also the fact that 1 year prior, I had sat in the temple, the one that got burned down, and then they built a new one the next year. I had sat in the temple and promised myself against all odds, because with me and making promises to myself, and against all odds because I was really just in a really, as you know, challenging place, promised myself that I would not end my life, that I would stay. Actually, I didn't say I wouldn't end my life. I said I would stay alive until Burning Man 2023. And I would come back to this place and I would celebrate if I honored that promise. But I knew that I would honor that promise. And there were so many times, y'all, there were so many times in the time that I made that promise in the fall of late summer 2022 until that next year that the reason that I'm alive today is because I made and honored that promise. So I went into the temple that day and I walked in and there was this incredible altar, this incredible tribute to Tigray. It was sort of like in this old suitcase or something. And it was filled with all these incredible mementos and it had their picture. And I just knelt down on the ground in front of that. And I had the most cathartic sob. This lasted probably a very long 10, 15, 20 minutes of me just sobs, just racking and leaving my body. Sobs for the many times that I almost wasn't here. Sobs for the deep, dark place that I was in. Sobs for Tigray. Sobs for everybody else who had taken their lives. Sobs for everybody else who had died in that temple. Sobs for the fact that I was so fucking grateful to be alive and to have this moment and to feel that dust and that dirt underneath my knees and to have my hand on Tigray's altar. And once I just remembered this. Once I dried my eyes after this like 10, 15, 20 minute just cathartic release of crying and feeling and just letting it all go on the dust, I sat up and was drying my eyes, and a little bird, like the size of a finch, flies into the temple. We are in the middle of nowhere. There are no trees around. We're in the middle of the Black Rock Desert. It's hot. It's dusty. I look up. I'm looking up, and this bird flies into the temple and lands up on. There were these high windows near the top of the structure, and it's just sitting there on a 2x4. And I'm like, "Is this a real bird?" I thought it was a prank. Honestly, I thought it was like, because where is this bird going to come from? And so I'm looking around. Like, is anybody else noticing? Nobody else was noticing this bird. It was like I was the only, was looking around, and the bird stayed. And it was just sort of like looking here and there and like pecking around and looking out the window and then looking inside and kind of hopping here and there in that little area. And that bird was my hope. That bird was my sign. That bird was balm to my soul. And finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I noticed that someone was crying and was putting some items up on the wall for someone that they had lost. And I went up to them and I gave them a hug. And I said, "I just want to show you something. Do you see that bird?" And they looked up, and their face showed me that that was a real bird and that they had not seen it. And they just, oh my gosh, crying. They started the tears, and then they hugged me and they said that that bird was meaningful for them, for the person that they had lost. That birds were an important symbol for them too. And then I left the temple, and I just, another really beautiful, important moment. And which brings us towards the end. I have a couple more things to share with you on this journey to get to the end of 2023 and closer to where we are today in mid 2024. So now we fast forward to the end of the year in 2023. It's just a few months since that bird at Burning Man. And I was back in Marfa, where I started this journey back in 2022 before I went into the deep depression. I'm back in Marfa. It's cold out. It's winter, December in Marfa. It gets really cold here because it is at high elevation. And I am just feeling great. My life has hope. I am, largely most of my circumstances didn't actually change, but my perspective shifted wildly, right? It wasn't like, oh, things started going my way and I started making all this money and, somebody gave me this great opportunity. Not really. Mostly like there was some incremental growth and things were starting to go in the right direction, like logistically in terms of money and career and other things. But mostly 98% was that my perspective and my mindset had changed dramatically. So I was going to a meditation retreat with this meditation group that I've been a part of for many years in Marfa. And it was like a 2.5-day retreat. And, in the days, like a cold snap had come. And the day before the meditation retreat, it started to get really cold. And I just felt like I was coming down with something, maybe a cold or the flu. I was just feeling a little nauseous and a headache. But I pressed on with the meditation retreat. And when I was at the meditation retreat, I was feeling pretty good, actually. So I wasn't feeling super sick. Now, the final day of the meditation retreat, it was a half day. And that night, it was supposed to get really, really cold. So we finished the meditation retreat at about 1, I think, or 2 p.m. and I go out to the RV to grab pajamas to take her for a walk because she's been cooped up all morning. I open the door and she doesn't come to the door. And I thought that was a little bit weird. Here she is breathing with a really funny look on her face. There's pajamas. So I grabbed pajamas to, like I said, give her a walk. She didn't come to the door. I thought that was weird. So I grab her, put her on the leash, and take her out for a walk. And the whole walk we were on, she was just acting very, very distant, and she wasn't walking very fast. And she was just like she just seemed very out of it. So I'm like, gosh, what's up with this dog? Is she just like really tired, or is it super cold? I don't know. So I drive to actually the place where I am right now, where I'm recording this episode. I drove here to my favorite spot. And I parked and I had a bunch of stuff to do on my computer. So I'm sitting here at my table working on my computer. It's cold outside, but it's sunny. And I am just starting to feel crappy again. And that night, it was supposed to be an insane cold snap. The night before had been really cold, like 17, but tonight was supposed to be even colder, like down to 11 degrees. And I was, getting ready to the day's pressing on. I'm feeling kind of crappy, but I'm just like, just press through, like, whatever. Like, I'm just kind of like ready to go to bed. I was feeling tired. I was feeling nauseous. And I look up from my computer and I'm like, come on, get your shit together, Kate. Like, you're fine. And I looked out this window right here. And as you can see, sort of, it's a field behind me. I'm going to like move out of the way. It's a field. It's very blown out because of the light, but there's a beautiful field in front of me. And I've been at this spot, I don't know, 20, 50 times. And I look up from my computer and I see something darting in this window over the field. It's a hawk, you guys. It is a freaking hawk. Not only is it swooping and diving, but it's going making whatever fucking sound hawks make. And at first I was like, oh my God, a hawk, amazing. I was so stoked to see it. I'm looking at it. And then like time is going on and this hawk is just, and this is a rectangular window. And I swear this hawk was like, it was like this was a TV screen and it was just staying within the bounds of this screen. And finally I'm like, oh my God, I get up from my table here and I sit right here looking out the window at this hawk going, what is going on? I even got my phone. I can't remember if I videoed or not. And it was just very clear that this hawk was like, here for me? That's honestly what it felt like. And so I finally, after, I don't know, it seemed like 2, 3, 4 minutes, finally the hawk flies away. And I sit back right here on this couch and I was like, wow, this is unreal. What an amazing experience. And then I was like, hawk. What does hawk mean again? Hawk means pay attention. I've been feeling like shit. Pajamas was really out of it. I wonder if I have a propane leak. So I rush over to the cabinet. I grab my propane detector out, and it's this device where you have to like hold it outside to calibrate it on fresh air. And then you have to like play with this dial until it gets to a certain thing. And then you bring it inside. And as soon as it senses it will, if it senses, it makes a noise like, "Rrr." And I swear as soon as I brought it inside my RV, it was the loudest, highest rating that it can get. And it really does sound like that. I know I made it sound like Kermit the Frog, but it really does make it sound like that. It goes click, 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 click. So I am like, oh my God, I have a propane leak. So I'm like testing all the area by the fridge, by the furnace heater, by the stove. I have multiple leaks in this thing. So I think what happened was the night before it had gotten really cold. And when it's cold, metal contracts. And I think it must have loosened a bunch of connectors. But as soon as I saw that, I start testing it. Another test you can do, just so you know, in addition to having a propane detector, if you don't have that, you can also fill a spray bottle with soapy water and spray it on the propane connector points. And if there is a leak, it will, bubbly water will start to spurt up, or, bubbles will start to spurt up. So I found multiple leaks, big leaks. I'm starting to tighten them, to fix them, to keep the windows open, to air this out, to protect Pajamas and I. And I just thought about how that night it was supposed to be super, super cold. And so I would have closed up all my windows, put the heater on, the propane heater. I would have had the fridge going on propane as it does, and I would have gone to sleep. And I might not have woken up, y'all. Whew. And the reason that is so relevant to the story of this 3-part series that I'm sharing with you is partially because it's the 4th hawk encounter in 6 months. It is also a hawk encounter that saved my life because it caused me to pay attention. And if you remember, when I was in the lowest of the low of my depression, the way that I had planned on unaliving myself was to take my RV, hook up a hose from the exhaust into the window, take some sleeping pills, go to sleep, and not wake up. And now here we are, 1 year later, after I couldn't get that idea out of my head for months. And I am so grateful that hawk saved my life. I am so grateful to not be dead. I am so grateful to be alive. What a change. In 1 year, I almost ended my life myself in that way. And then in 1 year, I don't want anything to do with dying and ending my life. And I'm so grateful to that hawk. And it makes me think about a story that my friend Rose, who's my friend here in Marfa, told me once. She said that there was a period in her life when she was really grappling with this question of like, why am I here? What's the point of all this? Am I even meant to be here? Like she couldn't find her path. She felt so lost. And so it all culminated in this one day when she was sitting out on her back table here in Marfa, in her backyard. And she was just like head in hands, just like asking God and the universe and anybody who would listen, like, why am I even supposed to be here? And she sat there from the time of the day into the evening. And then as the stars appeared out here in West Texas, these beautiful bright stars came out. She had this realization as she looked up at that night sky. And she realized that the evidence that she's meant to be here is that she's here. And yeah, you can challenge that. There's tons of reasons why you could say, oh, it's not enough. That's not evidence. But isn't it? We were born. I'm alive. I'm here. Isn't that enough? And is that where we can begin to move on with our life, where we just accept that we're here and that we're meant to be here? In that low, low point of my depression, I felt that God had forgotten me. Regular life didn't work out with the marriage and the job and the house and all of that. Alternative life at that point, I was like, this isn't working out for me either. There's no path for me. God has literally forgotten about me. I'm just here and I'm lost and there's nothing for me here. So I might as well just leave. Now I can tell you, I'm meant to be here and God forgets no one. Thank you for joining me on this 3-part story adventure. I'd love to hear if you have any questions or requests for elaborations on some of the side stories I alluded to. Please share this with someone who might need to hear it. Someone who's in the low part, someone who maybe you suspect that they have negative thoughts on a loop that they've let go unchecked. Send them this podcast, send them this show, Be Alive with Kate Manzer, and point them to this 3-part series so that they can see how even when you feel like there's not a light at the end of the tunnel, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Nothing lasts. Happiness doesn't last forever. Depression doesn't last forever. Nothing lasts. Even though it feels like there's no way out of that depression, it will not last forever. Please have hope. Please keep going until the light comes back. Look for light. Retrain your brain. Ask for help. Say yes. Take medicine if you need to. You're meant to be here. God forgets no one. It's a beautiful day to be alive, and I'm so fucking happy that you're alive.